in other parts of the world in education. But the reason that I'm so excited about learning by questions is basically I think it's different. I've seen lots and lots of technology innovations in education, and very few of them stick, because they try and do something which I think is incorrect. They try and replace teaching. They try and do it instead of. One of the fundamental things I love about learning by questions, it works with teaching. It frees teachers. And there are three things I particularly wanted to mention about it. The first, I think it supports teacher workload, and we cannot overestimate how important that agenda is. It's very worrying and troubling as someone who's had a full and wonderful career in English education to know that of those NQTs that starts working with us this September, on the current trajectory, something like 1 in 3 of them won't be in the profession in 5 years. We've got to find ways of reducing the workload and re-energizing and bringing the joy back into this profession by freeing people, by taking away some of the unnecessary burdens. And too much technology in the past has actually just added another layer rather than helped you. We're in many ways an undisrupted profession. Many professions have found a way of using the technology to reduce, take out some of the tasks. We've just added more burdens. Learning by questions doesn't do that. It frees teachers in all sorts of ways I'm going to talk about in a bit more. It shares the burden with teachers, so they can spend more of their time doing what matters most, focusing on and working with the children directly. The second thing I think it does, which is always kind of sometimes overlooked, it creates great questions. One of the hardest things to do in education, in my view, and right at the heart of great teaching, is the ability to generate a great question. There's nothing worse than observing a lesson and watch a teacher try and make questions up on the run. It's kind of difficult to do. And that's a huge task. That's a kind of weekend, Sunday task, creating these banks of questions, or just relying slavishly on a textbook where it's done for you. What learning by questions does, of course, is create thousands. There are 60,000 questions that you then organize into sets, or organize the sets for you, that you manipulate as a teacher, that you supplement as a teacher. So you've got this resource to start with. And the questions are very carefully crafted and authored by many ex-teachers, and I'm going to talk to Dave about that later on. Right at the center of this is the quality of the questions, which I don't see in many other resources. And finally, the thing I want to talk a bit about is it improves opportunity for teachers to focus on feedback. Now, you don't need me to tell you that if you look at the international evidence on effective teaching, the most important strategy a teacher can develop is the capacity to give great feedback. But giving great feedback is difficult. And the rub on feedback, of course, and the evidence is clear here, is feedback can go both ways. It can either improve the quality of education for children, or bad feedback can make it worse. So how do you get great feedback? How do you continually hone your skills to give great feedback? So I want to talk about feedback in a minute. But the other reason, so that's my first sort of clutch of reasons. It does the right things in the classroom. And that's where it comes to life for me, in classrooms. And I've had the joy of watching it being handled and used by fantastic teachers. The second main reason that I really want to be involved in this is because of the people that work on it. You know, they're humble and modest people, but they're people who are committed to the endeavour of improving education for children in England, particularly for the most disadvantaged children. This is authentic. It doesn't come from a nebulous group of people in the East Coast or Shoreditch. It actually comes from people who live and breathe with teachers and schools every day in the north of England. And that's great, because it means that it's handled by people who really understand what they're doing and people who are committed. And Tony's personal commitment, this is funded by a charity, this is run out of that stable. And that, I think, should be honoured and recognised, the work that you've done, the commitment you've made, Tony. But I want to talk about feedback a bit more, because I think this is so important. Now, we know something about feedback. It's been studied by many people. You'll know the work of John Hattie or Mazan, or even the work at the EEF looking at feedback, because it's so important. And there are 3 domains of feedback that I just want to quickly touch on, because I only want to speak for a few minutes. The first is the capacity and great feedback that you're able to feed forward. You set very clear learning goals for children. You know that great feedback requires you to be very clear about the learning challenge, the scheme of work, the plan. It's well pitched, it's well designed, it's at the right level of stretch and challenge. And of course, the learning sets do that for you. They give you the chance to work through questions from early, if you like, in maths, early sort of calculation, all the way through to problem solving and reasoning. They take you on a journey. And feedback requires, great feedback is built on the capacity to design learning that is in that frame. So it's aligned to what we know about the great evidence there. It's also very important that feedback, as you know, is about building from the known to the unknown. And the learning sets, again, allow you to give children the chance to have success in the early questions as they then move to the more problem-solving and the challenging questions going through. Again, that's aligned very strongly to the evidence. We also know that good feedback allows you to secure mastery, to have lots of chance to practice and hone and become fluent and automatic in your responses, to develop self-regulation as you self-correct and monitor your own learning. The second phase is monitoring. The first phase is to feed forward. The second phase of feedback is to monitor in the task. And this is when learning by questions really comes to life when you watch the children with it. As they're working through the questions, they're prompted to have another go. They're encouraged if they don't get it right. They're rewarded immediately with a correct answer. In the moment, not a few days later, not even a few hours later, in the moment, you've got that right. That's really important to support mastery, but it's also really important to support perseverance. It drives you forward. You'll take on the next challenge. And you're also encouraged. You're prompted if you haven't got it right. Think about this. Have another go. You're encouraged to stick with it. This is hard to do if you haven't got the technology. How can a teacher possibly do that on the run? It's coming to the aid of teachers. And in that monitoring phase, of course, the promotion of self-assessment, which is what it encourages you to do. I got that wrong. What did I do wrong? Let me try again. You're self-assessing, you're reviewing as an individual, taking responsibility for your own learning. And then the third element of feedback, if you go from planning, the forward, the monitoring, the third element of feedback is to review, to stand back after the task and ask myself the question, how do I learn from that to move forward? What's my next opportunity? Well, this is the bit I love. This is the bit when the teacher's attention is guided. The teacher's attention is either guided to, do you know what? There's enough children struggling with question 7 that I'm going to pause all of this and we're going to do this together. Not based on a kind of assumption, but based on the data. That we now need to pause and look at this together as a group or as a class. Or that the teacher immediately moves to go directly to the child in the moment as the data shows them that they need support right there and then. Either to confirm behaviour or to ask them to think again and support them. That monitoring is very precise and guides the teacher in a very clear way. And then finally, I think for me, that it allows you to be really clear in the longitudinal work that Tony talked about what the future learning will be. You can see the task ahead. You can take responsibility to keep going for yourself. So teachers are guided to spend their time based on real-time information, offering opportunities to assess and teach in the moment before, and this is critical about why the immediacy is so important, before misconceptions become embedded and fixed. And we know that a lot of teaching is not about teaching new stuff. It's about unraveling misconceptions which have become embedded. And how do you stop that? You intervene immediately to prevent the misconception becoming embedded, and it gives you that opportunity. So it gives you it gives you opportunities to teach in a certain way, and I'm very excited about that. It gives you the chance to free the burden, to take some of the responsibility, to allow the teacher to have more time with the child and the individual children, to have the lesson, the questions already prepared that you can supplement and choose from. And also, of course, quickly, at the end of the lesson, the marking is done, if you like. You haven't got to take that home and go through that laboriously when it can be done much more quickly and immediately. So there's lots of reasons that excites me. But I think much more important than what I've got to say about it, and we could go much more deeply later on in the question if you wanted about some of the theory of why I think it's so well aligned to the theory, particularly on feedback. Much more important is what teachers think about it and how it actually works in the classroom. It's not the dry theory that matters, it's actually the practical application.